Alrighty, good afternoon, everyone. Let's see who we have left in the room. Can I just ask, how many of you in the audience are currently working on your PCI DSS version 4 implementations? Hands up.
Come on, guys.
Oh, sorry.
Everyone in the room, no matter if you're on stage or not. That's good. Well, you're all in the right place, so that's the best news so far. We're really excited about this panel. This is a really unique opportunity for us to hear from 3 global organizations about their experience and what they are facing and how they're implementing PCI DSS version 4 and sharing their experiences with you. So let's get started and grilling them for all the information they can provide. Before we do that, I will just ask you each just to say a quick hello and a little bit about yourself, starting with you, Walker.
Hello, everyone. My name is Walker Thompson, and I am lucky enough to lead the global PCI practice for Walmart, which encompasses 20 countries around the world where we have stores.
And I'm Chanda. I lead the CRSC function for Block. Block is the parent company for Square, Cash App, Afterpay, and a few other products.
And I'm Tony James. I lead I'm the Director of Payment Security for Target. And I just want to thank Wen for the wardrobe change to represent the Target red today. So thanks, Wen.
Well, to kick off this session, I'm going to start with you, Walker, and I'm going to ask you please to share some of your first impressions as you are preparing to complete your organization's implementation and assessment against PCI DSS version 4.
Yeah, thanks, Emma. So I think one of the first things that definitely stood out about 4.0 was this idea of the customized approach. I think we've all been there as an organization implementing a control and thought to ourselves, you know, this control just doesn't make sense in this case, or maybe we're implementing a new application, new environment, and just thought, wow, I wish we could do something different. Well, we've provided that feedback to the PCI Council, and I'm here to say they actually take feedback, and they heard us. And they've come up with this idea of the customized approach versus the defined approach. And this gives organizations the flexibility of choosing when and where to implement the defined control. One concern maybe that comes up with the customized approach is, as engineers are out there looking at the internet or control owners become more aware of 4.0, sometimes they can take maybe a reactive approach to 4.0, and they get to choose of when they will implement one of the controls with DSS 4.0. So at Walmart, we've tried to take a governance model within our team of allowing when and where the customized approach will be used. We haven't necessarily used it yet, but I could see where this approach would fit for large, mature risk management organizations like Walmart.
Great, thank you very much. And it is definitely very important for organizations to understand what is new with version 4, including the customized approach, how it differs from the defined approach, and what is involved in doing the customized approach. And it sounds like your organization's obviously very much heavily looking into that. So this is the guy to talk to if you want information about customized approach. Chanda, on to you. What have been some of your experiences with preparing for your version 4 upcoming assessments?
Thank you. So what we've seen is that it's a very long-term approach. The readiness process going from the current version to version 4 has taken us almost 2 years now. So you really want to plan. Start early, start looking at the requirements, start performing your gap assessment, include all the various teams that are going to be impacted. We've been talking a lot to our engineering and product teams, and we've even realized that in some cases you want to bring in the finance people because there's going to be some cost and other resources that you need to get yourself ready. So it's that aspect of planning for it early, starting early, and going through the process in a very project and methodical way will help you go through it.
Yeah, I definitely think it's been a very steep learning curve for a lot of people and a lot of organizations in getting ready for version 4. And Tony, down to you now. What are some of your experiences, and have you faced any specific challenges going through this learning curve, and how have you managed to address and solve those?
Sure. Thanks, Emma. So some of the things that we've done a lot is engaging in the industry. We do a lot of benchmarking and talking to our peers, some on the panel here with me today, to understand how other organizations are looking at it, what challenges they might face, to understand what impacts us. And one of the other things we do then, we talking to QSA. So making sure that we're not over-indexing and talking to QSA about what we're planning to do to meet certain controls and ensure that they don't think we're doing too much or kind of missing something. But one of the biggest challenges I see in the industry right now has to do with service providers. And so that's something we're really focused on, is our service providers. My concern is that any large service provider who supports perhaps many of us, if we would have one that wouldn't fail, that would kind of ripple through the industry. And that's something that we need to be focused on. And so what we're doing is engaging with all of our probably large service providers and some who might have been problem children in the past to understand and make sure they understand what they need to do to be compliant and that they will be compliant for PCI 4.0 in 2024. But the key that I want you to take away there is don't celebrate crossing that finish line with those service providers too soon. Because it's, as we've engaged with some of them, we get the answer of, don't worry, 2024, it's not, the 4.0 is not that hard for 2024. And realizing they're right, it's 2025 that'll be the challenge. So making sure you're checking with them going into 2024 and into 2025.
Yeah, and kind of build off that, like communicate, I think is kind of the word for Walmart in our PCI this year with 4.0. We've taken 4.0 on a roadshow throughout the organization with the different technology, product, business teams, doing specific engagement models, communicating on 4.0, what to expect, why we're making these changes. And that's helping our organization understand what we're doing and the timelines that we have to meet, as well as presenting to our leadership team on a monthly basis. Here's our status as we're working towards 4.0. Here's what to expect. Here are some of the heavy hitting requirements that require maybe additional budget or new products. So really work to communicate externally or outwardly with the teams on 4.0 right now.
And I think also as you are going through that gap analysis that we talked about earlier, you definitely want to involve your service providers there, because for the requirements that you're relying on service providers, you want to make sure that they have their side in place and you'll be able to rely on them once you get to the point where you are going through your certification.
And actually, on that point, Chanda, when you were talking about preparation and being all the effort going into preparing for the assessment and for version 4, was there something specifically that you were looking at with service providers from that perspective as well, about working with them and understanding how that fit in?
Yeah, we were really focused on a number of requirements. So we have multiple rocks, so the different service providers in there, but we were looking specifically at those requirements where we are relying on them and engaging them to see where they are in, firstly, to make sure that they understand the change in the requirement and that we are on the same page in terms of what the expectation is with the new requirement. Are they taking a defined approach, or are they taking a customized approach with that requirement? And then what is the timeline for their PCI or for their DSS 4.0 journey? So just trying to make sure that we are in alignment and we will not end up in a situation where we might be expecting to rely on a certain service provider for a specific requirement and they are not ready.
Yeah. And Tony, I wanted to go back to something you were saying about benchmarking and the role of the QSA in that process.
Sure.
Is that something you can expand on?
Yeah, so I benchmark with a number of groups on a monthly basis. So we check in on what's going on from a hot topic standpoint or how people are specifically addressing certain requirements for PCI 4.0 on a monthly basis. And so I would recommend anyone to do a lot of benchmarking that they can, anything that they can to try to engage with their peers throughout their time here today. As far as QSAs, the QSAs are, we look to them as the experts, but they're going through this at the same time that we are. And so knowing that and asking those questions about PCI 4.0 and how they're looking at it, but knowing you might not get an answer right away is key, because they might have to go back and talk to somebody who's done more research or has taken different tests or training related to specific details within the requirements or within a specific technology to be able to answer that question for you.
Yeah, no, understood.
And it's interesting at the time we're at, as I think of the PCI infographic that is well known, I feel like, and reshared every time that PCI does a new blog post. We're at the halfway point right now. It's 18 months until April 1st, 2025. So we're at that kind of medium spot of hopefully most organizations have done their due diligence and are beginning the heavy work on implementing 4.0, at least in terms of those future dated requirements. So it's an interesting time.
Yeah, that timeline is definitely, I think, a key document and a key thing to keep an eye on, and you might be hearing more about that as the afternoon goes on as well. We have a number of DSS sessions coming up that I think will include that as well. So we've talked about customized approach and the service providers. Are there any other sort of key areas where you find have been the biggest thing to adjust to, or what was the biggest change in version 4?
So some of the biggest changes in 4.0 that impact Target are related to authenticated scanning, some digital skimming requirements, and even multi-factor authentication.
Yeah.
The council's done a great job talking about multi-factor authentication in terms of how that's more of a clarification than how it was interpreted in the past. But I think that's a big impact in the industry right now around how teams are implementing multi-factor authentication twice within their environment when accessing the CDE remotely.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that's key for folks to be prepared for, both within their organization and perhaps in talking more about those service providers and how they're going to set that up for them.
And it's funny, too. It's not just maybe the control with authenticated scanning, large environment at Walmart. It's not just the scanning that you have to tackle. It's then the tool that all those vulnerabilities feed into. Can they handle the number of vulnerabilities
Absolutely.
that potentially have to intake, as well as then the remediation of the teams that drive the remediation of vulnerabilities will dramatically increase. So those engineering teams are going to be facing even more interface with the security teams most likely that are driving that remediation. So there's a lot of work that goes into perform authenticated scanning. So yeah,
it's a great one.
Very
to call
similar
out.
heavy lift at Walmart.
Yeah, and for us the struggle is when you think about it in a spectrum, we're not going to have a problem with about 95% of the systems. And the council has left a great out there for when it's really just not possible, when there's a system that actually absolutely can't do it.
Yeah.
And so those are really easy to identify. But the ones in the middle, where like, well, it'd be super hard, it'd take me 10 months and millions of dollars to do it, and it might tip over on Black Friday, where's that line? Is that impossible? Those are the kinds of things that we're trying to work through, is where those lines are. And that's going to be different for every organization.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, is that no two environments are the same. So the approach that you might be taking with your organization or you with your individual organizations may well differ from, the approaches that everyone else is taking with their individual organizations. But I do think that it's important to recognize the significant value that comes from, sharing experiences and having information sessions like this, hearing about how other organizations are handling, whether it's a specific requirement or a new technology, or how they're, managing their actual implementation approach, like how they're coordinating the communications, within the organization, which is something that you've mentioned as well, and some of the planning and the preparation tools that help with that. So I think what I'm interested now in asking, and I'm going to ask each of you, and I'll start with you again, Walker, so you have a minute to prepare, is really if you could offer one key takeaway or one recommendation that you really feel would be of benefit, for those in this room to take with them and to help them with their PCI DSS version 4 implementations, what would that be?
Yeah, I guess my key takeaway may be to partner with your QSA. We're lucky at Walmart. We have some great partners that we've been lucky to have for the last few years. As Tony mentioned, our QSAs often bring good industry experience, leveraging their industry experience, plus our internal industry experience and knowledge of our systems and business, utilizing those two together as we worked over the last 18 months to understand the new requirements, go about what are the big requirements that require a lot of lift, where are the complications in implementing some of these. That partnership has been key. We've also worked with our QSAs this year in not only working through a 3.2 gap or 3.2 assessment, but and delivering our ROC and AOC, but giving us a gap assessment of 4.0. Sometimes internal engineering teams at Walmart, they like that third-party viewpoint. Walker, you say this, but if it comes from a qualified third party, I'll pay attention to that report.
Okay.
So using their expertise and their report can be beneficial as you work through this journey of implementing 4.0. So I would say if you don't have a good QSA, there's probably some QSAs here in the audience who who want to talk to you, or go to the exhibit hall. I definitely saw 10 or 15 QSA firms, so go network and find the right QSA for you and your company, and it should benefit you.
Okay, so hearing about partnerships, your organisation and your QSA, and communication, and get help. Chanda, how about you? What would be your one key takeaway that you would like folks to remember from this discussion?
I'm going to go back to preparation. I think just building in the time that you need to get ready and going through that methodical approach of assessing your environment, making decisions on what changes need to be made, where we dedicated part of our team to work on this. And I think that's been very helpful to have time or people dedicated to that gap analysis process. And then Walker talked about building that knowledge using your QSAs, but I think it's also important, in addition to that, it's important to build that knowledge internally. We've had several of our team attending the ISA training this week, and that's part of that, just getting that knowledge and bringing it in-house and making sure that we fully understand what the new standard is looking for from us, and then bringing that internally to all the impacted teams and making sure that we're all on the same page. So be prepared, start early.
I completely agree on the ISA point. If anybody's heard me talk about it before, I mean, ISAs are great to have on your team. It really helps you have that different communication with your QSA and be at a different level. Like half my team are ISAs, so completely agree, Chanda.
I'm really glad you both mentioned the ISA program, because as you mentioned as well, the training was this week, and this is the new version 4 training for ISAs, and we did have the version 4 transition training for ISAs, QSAs and PCOPs last year, but this is actually now the full training is launching. So this is definitely the time to have your ISAs, sign up for the training, or have more ISAs, qualify if you need them on your team. So yeah. And it's definitely good training. It's good fun training. It's very interactive. So.
It is. You did the best job ever. We're trying to make it entertaining as possible.
If you've ever done a training course, they tend to be a little dry, especially when we're talking about security controls and payment data. But the new training is very interactive and very engaging. So we certainly hope it'll be beneficial to the community for that. So, well, Tony, we are down to you at the end there. It looks like you're going to get the last word on this. Right. So if you had one key takeaway, what would that be?
So I'm going to break the rules. I have 2 key takeaways. First of all, don't overthink this. You are the best experts in your companies, your organizations, about how it works and how PCI 4.0 will impact you. In 2021 and 2022, so when you saw the drafts and the standard released, we got a lot of information and did a lot, again, benchmarking and talked to others in the industry and looked at the webinars and read all the articles and really understood that some of the biggest changes and impacts would be. And we listed some of them here today. And as I went back to then say, okay, here's all the projects we need to run at Target, we had to take that step back and say, well, hold on. Those might be the biggest changes in the industry. But it doesn't mean it's going to be the biggest changes for us. So digital skimming would be a great example. Digital skimming is a huge change. Again, it should be in the standard. It's a great thing to have in there, and we should be focused on it. But from a compliance standpoint at Target, we have a solution. It's called Merrymaker. It's been open source. You're welcome to use it if you'd like. Hit me up if you want to know more about it. But the point is, it didn't impact us as much as it will others in the environment, or in the industry, because we already had something in place there. So if you're just starting now and you're trying to figure out what should I focus on, don't just listen to what other people are telling you. Take that information in, go back and understand your environment and dig in, because you, again, are going to be the biggest experts. The second thing, though, is if you're struggling, if you don't know where to start, you are in a unique position right now to look to your left and to your right, because this is probably the only room you will ever be in where everybody here wants to talk about PCI 4.0. Even next year, it won't be the same. Any room you go to back in your organization, it won't be like that. You will have to recreate this room. So if you don't know exactly what you need to be focused on and what the biggest things are and what to go back and think about, engage, network here, and build those connections. I talked about networking a lot and benchmarking. And like I said, I talk to these gentlemen frequently. It took me talking to 30 contacts 7 years ago to get to find 3 that are good that I started talking to and build that group. So it's not, don't just talk to the 2 people that are sitting next to you now. Talk to as many people as you can to build that network and make those connections. That will help you jumpstart your program.
Well, that is a great note for us to start to wrap up on, so thank you for that. So thinking about some of the key themes that we've talked about today, we've heard the importance of understanding your own environment, as well as understanding, how PCI DSS version 4 applies to your environment. And that includes being very prepared and understanding all your connections, both internally and externally. Communication is something that we heard a lot about as being a critical factor for the success of an implementation and preparing for an assessment. And also that networking is key, and be it in a room like this, or be it with your own internal teams, or with your own business partners, your service providers, all those relationships are key. And also, I think another thing that I would like to add on to what you were saying about the value of these sorts of meetings is that, as well as the information sharing and the networking and the discussions that we can have, there's also a lot of resources available that you can learn about here and you can find out about. And some of those are PCI DSS resources, the training we mentioned, the value of having qualified teams in your own organizations, PCIPs, ISAs, et cetera. Also finding, potentially an industry professional to help you, whether it's a QSA or one of the solution providers or vendors that has products listed on, the PCI DSS website that can help with security in your environment. There's a lot of good resources that are available that you can learn about here. And we also have, information resources on our website. We have a resource center where you can learn about any new guidance that's being published for version 4 and FAQs and blog posts and all that kind of thing. So don't feel like you have to go through this alone is something that I would add to the advice they've given. Reach out, talk to people, and find out what resources are there to help you. So with that, I would like to sincerely thank you all for coming on this panel today and sharing your experiences. I will also welcome everybody to come and find these gentlemen over the next few days, come and hit them up in person, look them up on the app, whatever it is. I'm sure they'd be more than happy to talk with you. Make the most of the opportunity to learn from them and from others in the room. And with that, I hope you will enjoy the rest of the sessions here, and thank you again. Thank you.
Wait.